On January 14th, I was interviewed by Zennie Abraham of Zennie62video regarding my candidacy for Oakland mayor. Here are excerpts from that hour-and-a-half interview.
Hey, John, tell my viewers why you're running for mayor, what this all about. What was the aha moment where you said, doggone it, I'm going to do this?
And there's been a lot of very serious columnists and newspaper articles on the potential for a coup of some sort. Really, it would be kind of like what they call a legal or auto coup, not like the generals stepping in and throwing a bunch of people in prison and executing some people and formally taking power, but something similar to, for instance, what happened in Hungary with the extreme right-wing racist prime minister that's in there right now. You see that on the one hand. On the other hand, I really feel that the approach that the Democratic Party is taking, including from Biden on down in all wings of the Democratic Party, including the Bernie Sanders wing, is a complete disaster. And they never were friends of the working class. They never represented the working class, and in the past. But a lot of people see them as the best alternative at this point. But what the road that they're following, and as I said, it potentially leads to disaster. And I think that what's really needed is an independent working class movement in the streets, in the workplaces, in the working class communities, and also in the union. Any opportunity that we have to raise these ideas, I think at this moment, it's obligatory to do so. If you live in an apartment building on the second floor and your apartment catches on fire, you're kind of morally obligated to sound the alarm as loud and as often as you can. My main point is, look, Oakland is not a bubble. It doesn't live it's not in isolation. And any single problem that we face in Oakland, whether it be crime, whether it be poverty and homelessness, whether it be environmental problems such as the air we breathe, which every other summer is almost unbreathable because of the wildfires, every single problem, housing, none of those problems can be solved just in Oakland alone. It's part of a national and, in fact, in many cases, an international problem. And so that's the solution. And my campaign is geared towards pointing that out, trying to build a working class movement or making a small step in that direction as part of a step in the direction of building a mass working class political party.
Tell my viewers about you. What's your background?
Do we have 2 hours? I grew up in New York City. I got my education. I really owe a tremendous vote of thanks to the heroic movement of Black people in the South in the 1960s. That was what really educated me. I was also involved in the movement against the Vietnam War. I came out here in 1969. I've been living since about 1970 in the part of Oakland that used to be known as Funktown. I started as a carpenter in the Carpenters Union in 1970. And I got active in that union, always fighting for the membership and demanding that the unions really fight for the membership and really for all workers. I've been active in, I do a blog site, Oaklandsocialist.com. So that's the short story. I've also done a lot of travel, both political travel, both in the United States and internationally. I've devoted all my life to fighting for working class people. And, that's what this campaign is all about.
What in your view is the main problem that you want to address? I know, it's gun violence and crime, but what say you? Because if you happen to be mayor, the rubber meets the road, and these are things you gotta deal with.
Right. Well, I know that one issue that really concerns a lot of people is the issue of crime. And you have to look at what's the basis for it. And number one is poverty, which cannot be resolved just in Oakland alone, which involves a struggle for good jobs at union wages and at good union wages, because not all union wages are living wages. That's number one. But also, for the last 75 years, we've been subjected to this relentless propaganda of look out for yourself and the hell with everybody else. And if somebody's lying in the gutter, if worse comes to worse, step over them to get to where you want to go. Just complete selfishness, and the only thing that matters in life is make as much money as you can. So if that's the prevailing attitude, and you can't make a lot of money as a banker or a lawyer, then what's the difference between that and sticking somebody up in the street? Because the social consequences don't matter. And incidentally, the last general strike that occurred in the United States was in Oakland in 1946. And at that time, the chief of police said that all crime in Oakland came to a stop because everybody was so busy fighting for working class people. So that's what I would do. And the first step that I think any workers' representative has to do is to convene neighborhood block open air meetings to discuss what are the issues here in this community, and how can we as workers organize ourselves to deal with them. And that goes for crime, unemployment, poverty, lack of decent jobs, and also involved in that you have to have a real crash organizing campaign to unionize all the major workplaces. But just having a union isn't enough, because most of the union leadership, or almost all of it, is convinced of this idea that they have to work hand in glove with the employer in order to keep the employer happy, to keep them profitable. And in other words, in many ways, they're the representative of the employer inside the union. That's why they do everything they can to eliminate all the best traditions of the labor movement. And so that would be the first step. And as far as money for the city of Oakland, we know that Oakland is massively underfunded. And the answer to that, we would tear a page out of what there was a layer of socialists in the city of Liverpool in England back in the 1980s, that they demanded from Thatcher that she give extra money to the city of Liverpool to build housing, to hire workers, and so on. And they basically shut the city down, or threatened to. And I think there was 3 years, they were the only city in the entire country that got extra money from Thatcher. And that's what we would do. What has to be done here in Oakland is to build a mass movement to demand that money from where it is. And those who say there isn't any money, I have just 2 words to answer that. The first word is Jeff, and the second word is Bezos. At this point, Zennie raised the question of AB 464. I was not familiar with that particular bill, but since then I've looked at it, and I have to say that I have a different point of view about that bill from Zennie, and I hope I can come back on his show to discuss this difference, because it's not just a difference in one particular piece of legislation. It's a difference over how you resolve the economic crisis that we in Oakland and workers in general are facing. I'm going to delete that part of the discussion, though, in order to keep this video as short as possible. It did, however, lead to the discussion about tax policy in Oakland and in the state. I believe this is the only city in the state that doesn't tax its ports. But also, if you just look at the history of state tax policy, you can see that over decades now, the proportion of state taxes that comes from corporations has gone down and down and down and down. So all of that has to change, but it's not going to be changed by the Democrats. That's been made, they've made that crystal clear over the years. So it has to be changed through building a mass working class movement, and through that, building a working class party.
Why do you think that Democrats have forgotten about the kitchen table issue of money? Or am I wrong?
Well, I don't think they've forgotten about it, because I don't think they ever kept it in mind. You know, I mean, what's happened is, as the unions have gotten weaker, and as the working class has gotten more and more fragmented and more, in some ways, confused, for instance, the degree of support for Trump within the working class. As that's happened over the years, it's freed up the Democrats to make fewer concessions to workers. And so, I mean, that's not only happened in California, as we know. And also, the other side of it is that there's a crisis, a developing economic crisis in the capitalist system. And so the capitalist system, United States capitalism, simply cannot afford to make the concessions to the working class that it did in the past.
There's that part where you have the platform of wanting to call for a different way to address the needs of workers through socialism, which is here. Mm-hmm. But then there's also that pragmatic part of just running the city.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like you're missing a piece to connect the two that would ignite your campaign, as opposed to it, because it looks to me, and I'm happy to be wrong, but it looks to me like you're kind of saying, oh, they'll never go for this, so I'm just going to like speak on this issue, and that's that. Am I wrong?
The point is, you know, to get some issues out there and imbue working class people with the spirit, with the understanding that, hey, we can build our own movement. And as far as administering a city like Oakland, I mean, let's just talk about it, administering the question of public safety, which is a huge issue in Oakland. And I think that everything that we've seen proves that the police cannot and will not act in the interests of working class people in Oakland. And so one thing that I think needs to be done is to organize elections for committees of public safety in each working class neighborhood in Oakland. And so there would be elected representatives for that committee. Then that would be funded by the city of Oakland, and they would, because they are part and parcel of the community itself, and they're elected by and responsible to the community itself. It would be both the neighbors, the residents, but also those who work in the community. You know, that would be one way to, as you put it, to administer the issue of public safety.
It seems to me that you have, again, two worlds. You have the ideological part now, right? But I think in your head, that ideological part can't fit with the pragmatic aspect that's there. My point is, everything you want to achieve legislatively is already there. You just have to know how to turn the levers, right?
Well, I don't agree that it's already there. For instance, the tax policies would have to be massively transformed. And like what I said about committees of public safety, that would be something entirely new. So it's not just a matter of tweaking what we already have, which is really just rearranging the lounge chairs on the decks of the Titanic. as you probably know, I mean, West Oakland was a cultural mecca for decades, you know, and what was the basis for that was a massive working class that was employed often at union jobs. You know, you had GE, you had General Motors, you had all these little foundries up and down East 12th Street and San Leandro Street. All of this, and that was the basis for the health of the community there. And when those started to close down, that was when the drugs came in, and the massive poverty that followed. And so again, I would say it's the major employers, which is to say the working class, that has it that can provide a solution, not small businesses.
We had the offshoring and manufacturing. First, you know, we went from the snow belt to the sun belt, then the sun belt to the Pacific Rim, or the whole Pacific Rim stuff, right? And then even Japan lost out to Korea, Korea lost out to the Knicks, and, you know, went all from there, okay? This has been a process. And my point is, as a trained Berkeley economic development officer, is that we've forgotten how to do economic development. But when we did it, it was beautiful. So my point is that, look, there's nothing wrong with a person wanting to start their own business as an artist or anything. That's just part of the deal. You can't just say, hey, no business for you, because it just doesn't work, right? And my point is that we have these laws on the books to achieve what you're talking about. But for some reason that is just driving me to tears, we don't use them.
I think what you're saying is confirmation of my point of view, because what you're saying is that closing of one workplace after another, that was the basis for the economic crisis in West Oakland, and really in Oakland as a whole.
And economic development is supposed to curb that. That's what I'm saying.
But it can't. It cannot. No, it can't. Well, it can't.
That's another video. We'll debate that one. This is your time.
but I'm saying why, in my view, it cannot, is it can't under capitalism, because the basis of capitalism is the capitalist has to have the right to invest his or her capital wherever they want, and they have to have the right to do it where it's most profitable. And so at the end of the day, you have to get rid of the capitalist system. You have to have socialism, and that gets back to, sure, I'm entirely in favor of doing things to encourage and make more possible small businesses, like an artist who wants to open up a store and a shop, that sort of thing. I'm entirely in favor of that, but that's not going to resolve the crisis that the millions and millions of workers around the country, including in Oakland, that's not going to resolve the crisis that we face. We can't give up on having workplaces that provide decent jobs. And there's some things that can be done. For instance, you can, if there's a workplace that's going to close down and move to wherever, Mexico, China, or South Carolina, you can have a workplace occupation to stop them from moving, like they had back in the 1930s. That's a step, but in the end, you have to take over the commanding heights of the economy, and then which means the huge major corporations, the banks, and so on. And then we will run the economy for our benefit.
I apologize. This is my home, and we use redevelopment to be that gap, to provide, as you say, the incentive for investors to put their money to stay in Oakland.
Our present economic system, which we know is capitalism, functions on the basis of where can I make the biggest profit the fastest. That's the basis of it. Mm-hmm. It always has been, and you can't change that basis. You cannot transform a lion into a lizard. They're they function completely differently. And especially with the developing economic crisis in capitalism, you cannot make it behave in our interests. nor in the interest of the planet, which is, I mean, which is a really serious look at just last year, for instance, we saw the amount of CO2 emissions increase in the United States. We can talk about anything we like, crime, economic development, anything we like. The way things are going, it's I mean, some scientists, some serious scientists are saying that the human species might be all but eliminated the way things are going. So when you look at that, then it has to be all hands on deck to deal with this sort of problem. And you know, as I say, you know, you yourself have basic, well, what you said about what can we do to convince investors to invest in Oakland. Well, that's basically it's that's the attitude of the union leadership. And the way to get them to do it is cut the wages and cut the working conditions and make sure the workers sit down and shut up and keep their nose to the grindstone. That's what investors are looking for.
No, that's not what economic development officers do.
Well,
I've never done it.
They might not say it. They might not say it in that many words, but that's what investors are looking for.
No,
and it's why. Look, every. But hold on now. Every time, I'm not talking about what investment. What excuse me.
Bless you.
What economic investment officers do. I'm looking at what the capitalists do. And every time that you have a proposal to raise the minimum wage to really what it should be is at least $25, if not $30 an hour, you have everybody and his uncle crying and screaming that you'll drive business out, which, you know, there's an element of truth in that. So what does that tell you? You can either have a job and starve, or you can be unemployed and starve.
The police, under that, how do we handle it? Because
I said what I believe in is these committees of public safety. As far as the police, you might remember her name. What was her name? It's about 5 years ago. A young woman, a sex worker, who turned out was.
I interviewed her, Celeste Guap. You can watch your interview right here.
Yeah. Right. And for people that don't remember, it turned out that there was a whole series of cops that were passing her back and forth like a bottle of wine, you know. And then it turned out that it wasn't just the Oakland police. There was a whole series of other police departments around the area that were doing that. And then it turned out that all the way up the chain of command, all the way up to the chief of police knew it. And if the chief of police knew about it, every single other member of the OPD either knew about it or had heard rumors. And not a single one said not one damn word until she went to the Chronicle and it came out in the open. So that shows you the level of just.
Well, actually, FYI, I got the first full interview with her.
Well, congratulations for you.
Yeah.
I mean, the first I heard about it was from the Chronicle, but
yeah, that's like you. Media. Sorry, just you gotta.
No, you deserve that. No, you deserve it. So, like I said, right on to you. But anyway, as I said, that shows the degeneracy of. It's not just the OPD, and it shows. Look, they will not function. You know, in the interest of working class people in this city, and you can put certain limitations on what they can do, on what they're doing, and we should, but we need to take a completely different approach. Yeah, I do think also that there are some very definite steps. I think that the police should be able to be sued individually when for one thing, and also they should go to jail and when they commit crimes, and so there's steps like that. I think that I don't know when the next contract with the police comes up, but number one, they're way overpaid, and number two is it's almost impossible to fire cop, no matter what they do. And so all of that has to be changed, and changed immediately. And this is another thing is there's the police so-called union. I don't believe that the police are workers, and I don't think that their union, in quotes, should be, you have the Alameda County Central Labor Council. I think that they should not be allowed to be in the Alameda Central Labor Council and should not be in the AFL-CIO. Something else that really needs to be done is we've seen how Proud Boys and these different groups like that, the Oath Keepers, how, as well as openly racist groups like the KKK, have infiltrated the police right throughout the country. And we need a serious investigation into what we have within the OPD. And I mean, I would be very surprised if they haven't infiltrated the OPD. Something else is, I've read reports that a lot of the cops are using steroids and working out.
That's
and it's what they call roid rage. Like, we know that people that habitually use steroids, they can go off the deep end as far as being violent. And so all these kinds of things have to be seriously investigated. Where is the police commission on this? Because if I've heard it, they certainly have it. And if they haven't, it's because they don't want to hear it. So that's why I kind of dismiss the police commission. Incidentally, before we finish, I would like to discuss that issue of the A's Stadium.
Well, that's what I was going to get to.
Cool. Okay.
What say you about Howard Terminal?
As you know, I've been opposed to it from before it was the Howard Terminal issue, when it was the Laney College issue. And there's a number of reasons for that. Number one, really what it is, as far as the Howard Terminal, what you have is a $13 billion real estate development deal hiding behind a baseball stadium.
Mm-hmm.
That the baseball stadium is that's just the bait for the hook.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, oh, economic development. Well, I can cite you, I can read you the quotes, but every single independent academic study on how much economic development, how much jobs has resulted from sports arenas right throughout the country, is almost nil. And in one case, it's true. And in one case, it was in Los Angeles. I forget which one it was. It was a basketball arena. When they closed down, they found that economic activity in that area actually increased after the stadium was closed down. So the jobs thing is just false. And then we know that the city of Oakland they say $850 million. They're going to spend over $1 billion, well over $1 billion.
I wasn't laughing for the reasons that you think. It wasn't about what you were saying. It's about something entirely.
Okay. Yeah.
Roger was a personal friend of mine. That's why I was laughing. Go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. So as far as the jobs, it's a complete wash, except for the issue. I mean, everybody connected with the Port of Oakland, whether it be from the side of the employers or the side of labor, has said, look, this is going to be a real job killer as far as the port. And the longshore is one of the few jobs in Oakland that somebody without a college education, and in fact, even possibly with some legal problems, we could say, in their background, that they could get, that has a good, well-paying job with benefits that they can raise a family on. And, years ago, there was a study done, I think it was by ABAG or something, Association of Bay Area, or no, it was some association of the top CEOs in the Bay Area, the top corporations, where they said that their plan was to develop East County, Alameda County, and Eastern Contra Costa County as kind of industrially, and West County, including like Western Alameda County, to make it be a middle-class bedroom community. And that's where they're headed with this. And let's not forget that when they talked about at one of the hearings about that, they talked about they said that this project will make Oakland into a tourist destination. Well, do we really want Oakland to be another Las Vegas? And then there's one last issue that we really have to consider, and I have commented on the developing absolute disaster of climate disaster. And we have to remember that whenever you have a poured in place concrete construction job, that as the concrete hardens, it emits massive amounts of carbon dioxide. And so I really think that we do have to consider, well, I mean, sure, you can't just stop all construction, but we do have to consider, do we want to have a project that is going to emit massive amounts of CO2 for a vanity project for Yuppie Schaff and her people to go around saying, oh, yeah, we have the Oakland A's, we have the Oakland A's. So from every point of view, there's not a single reason that working class people in Oakland should support this project.
Are you then in favor of the Vegas?
That's blackmail. That these real estate developers who hide behind a sports team, which really owning a professional sports franchise is just a real estate con game, and that's this blackmail that they use, whether it be baseball or football or whatever. If you don't give us X millions or billions of dollars and X amount of real estate for us to develop, then we're going to pick up and leave. And they go from one city to the next with this blackmail. And Oakland in the past has led the way for working class people in this country, from the general strike of 1946 to the Black Panther Party to Occupy Oakland. It's led the way and set an example for the rest of the country. So I say, let's set an example again and tell that right-wing Trump associated John Fisher, the owner of the A's, if that's what you want to do, that's what you do. But we are not going to concede to your blackmail. When we talk about development, what we're really talking about is jobs. Because nobody gives a damn, at least from my side, which is a working class side, nobody gives a damn about development except if it's going to provide them jobs. That's what they're concerned with. So that's the real issue, is how are you going to provide jobs? And as I said, and incidentally, as far as small businesses, if you had a $25, $27, $28 an hour minimum wage, then the person that's opening up a small restaurant, they would be absolutely flooded with business from workers who could afford to eat in a restaurant. Same thing with somebody who's an artist and wants to open up a little whatever, something for artists. Be the same thing. So that's when we talk about economic development, let's just put it on the line, jobs. That's what we're talking about. Jobs at a living wage, which $15 an hour, I see Derek Sue is saying living wage jobs. $15 an hour is not a living wage. Not in Oakland and really not anywhere else. So, and you have to tie that in, as I said, with real union organizing.
Christopher Jeff says, who will bring businesses and jobs to a city that does nothing for businesses?
I mean, we get right back to the issue that we've been talking about. To do something for businesses always boils down to keeping wages low and workers quiet.
But what do you say to, what do you say to the owners of Lucas who are slated to close their restaurant in a month, or to Tanya Holland, who had to go bankrupt because and had to close her Brown Sugar Kitchen restaurant, and in both cases received zero meaningful help from the city?
Well,
established by people like
you. You have to provide cheap rent for small businesses. You have to provide them with cheap credit. I don't believe that this AB 464, if it's not being utilized, and if it really could be utilized, I don't believe it's not being utilized because of incompetence. I believe that it's not being utilized because all these people look at Yuppie Schaff. If you look at her financial statements, you know, where she disclosed her major donors, who are they? They're all either bankers or real estate investors. That's who's running the city of Oakland.
The point is, you're not dealing with the tech part of it. What about technology, John? I'm not saying this as a Luddite or anything else. Very real. You know, it's going to change how we pay our workers and everything. What say you?
Well, as far as robots and mechanization and so on, you know, all the tremendous increases in productivity have gone into profits for the bosses. And we've had a 40-hour work week now. Really, it's more than a 40-hour work week in practice. But a legal 40-hour work week, we've had it for what? Over 100 years or close to 100 years. So what we need is a sharp reduction in the legal work week so that we as workers can take advantage of, can reap the benefits of the productivity gains. So if you bring a robot into a factory and it replaces 2 workers out of 3, and the productivity of that one worker goes up by 100%, then cut the work week in half at no loss in pay. So, but you can't just continue accepting things in the definition of the capitalists. Or we can, but it's just driving us insane.
That's for doggone sure. Because my question would be, look, if you want to bring the robots in, right, you don't need the worker. So,
well, you need somebody to operate the robot.
You know, that's another company, though.
Well,
okay,
if it's another company, or if it's or in like General Motors, to a certain extent, they have, you know, subcontract stuff out, and to a certain extent, you know, they have, for instance, robot welders and so on that they themselves operate. So to a certain, it's a bit of both, but it doesn't really matter. It's all it's the same principle: reduce the work week.
Why do you? And I want you to tell me that I'm wrong. Why is it seeming like you buy into that idea of, oh, it's the capitalists, we just have to have this workers' fight, and you exclude government? Why do you consistently in your prose exclude government, and yet you're running for mayor?
But I'm not excluding government.
Okay.
I'm saying you have to have a government made up of representatives of the working class. That all these people, if they're the Democrats or the Republicans, they get elected as representatives of the capitalists. And what you need is representatives of the working class, including a working class political party. Because, you know, if you hire the representatives of the wolves to guard the sheep, I don't care what they look like or how nice they might seem, you know what's going to happen. You know, and it's the same thing. I mean, we as workers are not sheep. I know that, but that's the problem. It's a class question. So I'm not denying the role of government. I'm saying a government by who?
John, I got to bring you back sooner rather than later to finish this, because, I mean, folks, this is not a joke. This man can win, okay? And he can win because, no, you say that and you think I'm joking. I'm not joking. And I'm not saying that because, you know, I'm saying, oh, you're my candidate or anything like that. No. I'm talking about the wins of change in the United States and what's happening, and when I'm looking at, I'm crystal balling. And my point is that, and you start off not taking, and you correct me if I'm wrong, okay? There's a party that doesn't quite take the idea of winning seriously. And my issue is when you step into this realm, and I've talked to people about this for I don't know how many decades now, whatever. You should expect that you can win.
Well, if for my campaign to win in the sense of actually winning the office, it will have to develop into a real movement from below with dozens and hundreds of workers actively involved. And in that situation, boom, you've got the new administration from those workers themselves.
Okay. And, we're in crisis, John.
We are. And it's a global crisis. And you have to start with that. And so I'd just like to encourage listeners, I have a blog site, Oaklandsocialist.com, which deals with a lot of these different issues. And also I've started a new Facebook page for my campaign, John Reimann for Oakland Mayor.